The idea that immigrants come over here and they don't know anything and they're dragging us down, because we all come from immigrants, including you, Tomi Lahren.
She talks about low skills. What exactly are her skills?
Her second great-grandmother had been here for 10 years, yet spoke no English. Oh, my gosh. 1930 census says Tomi's 3 times great-grandmother had been here for 41 years and still spoke German. She didn't speak English either. She doesn't even know her own history. She certainly doesn't know this country's history.
Fox News contributor Tomi Lahren is here to respond to that. So, Tomi, what led to that bashing on The View?
Well, there is a woman over the weekend who took it upon herself to research my family history in hopes of digging up some kind of a gotcha moment, a gotcha angle to validate illegal immigration and open borders. And what she found was really shocking, guys. She found that my family who came here in the 1800s from Norway and Germany, that they spoke Norwegian and German.
Okay.
And really what she did is prove that my family came here legally, but what she was hoping to do was try to call me a hypocrite for believing in merit-based immigration. Again, she failed miserably. But this really isn't what she calls resistance genealogy. It's just another indication of Trump derangement syndrome.
But
I really am happy, though, that she has such a fascination with my family history, and I'm hoping that she will take on Elizabeth Warren's next.
Wow, that would be very interesting. Tomi, a couple of things. They do not understand the conversations about illegal immigration and immigration. One group of people signs the guest book and says, I'd like to stay, here's my credentials. The other sneaks in. They might both be fine people, just as there's a way in and there's a wrong way in. And for them to go that deep in your background, you have gotten under their skin to a level I didn't think was possible. What is it about you that bothers them so much?
Well, it's not just me. It's anybody who advocates for merit-based immigration or has an issue with open borders. And again, just like you said, they don't seem to understand that we on the right believe in immigration. We understand that we are a nation of immigrants, and I am proud of my heritage. However, I do believe that the immigration crisis of today is apples to oranges from what it was in the 1800s when immigrants came to this country legally, were documented, worked for themselves, asked for nothing, and built a life and a family. That has nothing to do with the illegal immigration crisis of today that we must deal with. But they don't want to acknowledge that whatsoever.
Did you provide them with DNA, 23andMe? Because I cannot believe the detail on your background that they were able to get.
Well, I don't have to. She did all the research for me, so I'm sure my family is very appreciative. What about Joy saying, though, what are your skills? It's beyond research. It is personal. It is mean.
Well, of course, this is classical Joy Behar, but I would like to ask Joy Behar what her skills are, because perhaps we could swap stories. I know I watch Joy, and she seems like a highly skilled lady, but for her to attack me, that's really interesting. Those in glass houses should not throw stones.
Meanwhile, one of the things, the New York Times has this headline: breaking up immigrant families. This also has to do with immigration. A look at the latest border tactic. Clearly, as we have heard from the Attorney General of the United States, Tomi, this administration is actually going to be enforcing our immigration laws, where during the Obama years, not so much.
Well, during the Obama years, it was a cattle call to come into this nation illegally. And furthermore, this is, again, the left's attempt at emotional blackmail. And I would just like to state, I don't know if they understand this or not, but if you don't want your family to be broken up when you cross the border illegally, here's an idea. Don't cross the border illegally. Then your family will surely stay together. I don't know why the left can't think of this, but they would rather try to tell us that we hate families, we want to break up families, we're horrible, we're despicable. No, we want to enforce federal immigration law, which is why it exists in the first place. But again, the left cannot seem to understand this concept.
Well, and the United States is trying to enforce our border regulations down south. Over the last couple of years, it hasn't been so much. And then the news out of Israel yesterday was the fact that the Israelis were protecting their border, and the Palestinians understood that there could be trouble, but nonetheless, their leaders said, go ahead, breach the border, climb over the wall, because the Israeli soldiers have run away.
Well, as we've seen, Israel clearly doesn't play around, but every nation has the right to enforce their border. Every nation has a right to protect its citizens. I've said it before. You don't lock your door because you hate the people outside. You lock it because you believe in protecting the people inside. That is why we have a border. But the left would rather us have open borders. Again, that's a threat to our safety and security. And we that believe in legal immigration and we that believe in border enforcement will never stand for that, ever.
So, Tomi, on behalf of the people of Norway and Germany, we thank you for your appearance this morning. Together, you've become a fine human being.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, guys. Still waiting for Elizabeth Warren's genealogy, though. Maybe she'll work on that one next.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Maybe it'll be a talking point today on The View.
Thanks, Tomi.
Our resources are at their disposal.
A lot of people wondering how a shooter like this could get an AR-15. As you know, there have been many calls to ban semi-automatic weapons, including most recently from Republican Congressman Brian Mast of Florida, an Army veteran, lost both his legs in Afghanistan, a longtime NRA member. He says it's time to have a ban. Let's look.
I carried an M4 carbine, very similar to an AR-15. I was carrying that weapon on the battlefield in the most dangerous country on earth for one reason, because of its lethality. My community and my kids in our schools, I don't think that they're made safer by the general population of civilians having unfettered access to the best weapon the Army could put in my hand.
What's your response to Congressman Mast?
Well, first off, I think that I want to remind everybody that when students go back to school that next week in Parkland, the Broward County Sheriff's Office, who I think we need to have a conversation about as well, because this all stems from their dereliction of duty. And I know they say now it's 23 times that they had calls in addition to 2 FBI tips and numerous reports from classmates. It is. And under Florida law, they actually had the authority to go and arrest that individual before anything could be done. And I wish that as much attention were given to the Broward County Sheriff and their abdication of duty as trying to blame 5 million innocent law-abiding gun owners all across the country for this.
There's been no blaming here.
No, there has been, though. I know, but there has been. I think it's very important.
The AR-15.
The AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle. And I want to remind everybody that when you had a former Bernie Sanders staff member who tried to shoot up a baseball field full of congressional members with an SKS, it was that security that used their handguns to take down that individual. Now, as far as an AR-15, this is semi-automatic. People keep calling these weapons of war. This thing originated in the civilian market before it was adapted by the military. This is really a discussion about banning all semi-automatic firearms, and I wish that we could be genuine in our discussion of that. That's the position on AR-15s, and AR-15s are going to be in that school protecting students and teachers when they return back to class. But as far as banning on semi-automatic firearms, I think people need to just come out and say that that's what they're really talking about.
I think he was quite clear right there. He says they have to come up with a definition. It should be done, and there was, as you know, an assault weapon ban for 10 years from 1994.
And you yourself said that actually didn't have any overall effect on the crime rate. There have been numerous studies that show that.
It did not eliminate that, but there actually have been studies that showed it did have an effectiveness. I want to bring up from the University of Massachusetts researcher Louis Clareva shows that, look at that right there, from 1984 to 1994, you had 19 incidents, 155 deaths. Then, 1994 to 2004, it goes down. 12 incidents, only 89 deaths. The ban expires. We see the casualties go way up again.
And there are also studies that show, and you yourself have acknowledged previously, just a couple of years ago,
not perfection, absolutely,
that it did not have much of an effect on the crime rate. Furthermore,
but it does have an effect on the lethality
I want to point this out,
shootings.
George. I want to point this out, though. Only 3% of homicides in the United States actually are carried out with rifles. The highest number actually goes in with handguns. And these are illegally possessed by repeat offenders because these people keep getting slaps on their wrists.
No one's
but here's the bigger point,
let me just, excuse me for a second. No one's saying this is going to eliminate every single killing. But we do know we're the only country that has wide access to these kind of weapons, and no one else has the frequency or the intensity of these kind of mass shootings that we do.
That's actually not true. France had a higher casualty rate in 1 year than the entire 2 administrations of Barack Obama, and they're a fifth of our population. But, George, here's the biggest point here. We're talking about banning firearms, and the discussion is about banning all semi-automatic firearms, and that's really the discussion. Can we actually look at what could have prevented this? That firearm did not walk itself into the school. An individual who was allowed to go unchecked by the Broward County Sheriff's Office allowed that firearm to go in the school. This is not the fault, nor are 5 million innocent law-abiding Americans culpable for this. And many of us are parents too, George. I want to see as much attention on the Broward County Sheriff, the FBI, the 2 FBI tips, and the numerous calls. George, I'm not a member of the FBI. I'm not a member of law enforcement. But I'm going to tell you, if someone is online using their name saying they're going to shoot up a school, if they're banned from school because they've taken bullets and knives in their backpack to school, if they've been sending messages saying that they're going to shoot and kill their classmates, that to me sounds like a potential school shooter.
I'm not going to argue with that.
Family and neighbors called the Broward County Sheriff's Office to report this individual, and they did not follow up. That is the headline.
Could not agree more on that point. That is certainly a fact here.
That's what minimizes this. That's what minimizes casualties when we follow up.
It's one of the things that minimizes casualties.
It's the thing that minimizes casualties.
Almost all Americans believe that background checks for all gun purchases make a huge difference. Recent poll from Quinnipiac, 97% of Americans support that. The NRA opposes it. You know, we've seen all these NRA members I just cited.
Well, and I want to point out the question for that poll, by the way, was, do you support background checks if it prevents, those who are dangerous and terrorists, et cetera, from getting firearms?
So you think they just don't work?
I think everybody supports background checks, and I want to point out that it was the NRA that created the NICS system. Here's the problem, George. Do you realize that right now, and politicians could change this today, they could change it tomorrow. Did you know that right now 7 million prohibited possessors can walk into a gun store and legally purchase a firearm? People who have received due process, who through violent criminal behavior are illegally barred from purchasing and carrying firearms, people who have been adjudicated mentally unfit because they're a danger to themselves and others, they can right now go and buy a firearm, because as it stands right now, only 38 states are reporting less than 80% of these convictions to the NICS system.
And Dana,
That's
you know perfectly well the reason states aren't mandated to go through that system is because of a lawsuit the NRA filed.
That's actually a grotesque misunderstanding. I'm sorry to say that, of Prince versus the United States. That's what you're talking about. That case that you're specifically referring to, George, actually was a case where the federal government was trying to force states to implement and administer a federal program at the state level. However, that case that you're citing, the one that the NRA contributed an amicus brief to, says that that case did not do anything to stop states from reporting dangerous people who have been criminally convicted to the federal government.